Welcome back to our channel. Today, we delve into one of the most pivotal and tragic conflicts, the intense, long-standing war between the Apache and Comanche tribes. This conflict was not just a battle over territory. It was a struggle for survival, cultural preservation, and at times one of mutual destruction. Influenced by shifting power dynamics and new technologies introduced by European colonists, the Comanche rose to dominate the Great Plains. This rise ultimately contributed to the weakening of the Apache as a united tribe and military force, altering the power landscape of the American Southwest for generations. At the core of this story is the clash between two influential Native American tribes, embodying the broader themes of colonial impact, adaptation, and resilience. The story of the Apache and Comanche is about more than survival. It's about the fight to protect land, culture, and autonomy in a world transformed by European arrival. Although the Comanche ultimately emerged as dominant in this struggle, the conflict was complex, with victories, defeats, and a profound power shift that reshaped the destinies of both peoples. The Apache, known for their resilience, were a diverse confederation of culturally and linguistically related bands inhabiting the southwestern United States, including present-day Arizona, New Mexico, and northern Mexico. They shared common roots but adapted their ways of life based on the unique demands of their environments. While some Apache groups lived primarily as settled agriculturalists, others, especially some of the most renowned bands, were nomadic hunter-gatherers. Apache societies traditionally organized themselves into small, mobile groups known as bands, often led by respected elders or warrior chiefs. The nomadic Apache bands became well known for their expertise in tracking, hunting, and survival. For centuries, they thrived in the challenging deserts and rugged mountains of the Southwest, using their deep knowledge of the land to hunt buffalo, deer, and other game. In areas with more fertile soil, they also cultivated crops such as corn, beans, and squash. Over time, the Apache developed exceptional military skills. They were highly skilled fighters, known for conducting swift, strategic raids on rival settlements and tribes, which established them as a formidable force in the Southwest. Their understanding of the desert and mountainous terrain provided a significant advantage in defensive strategies. By leveraging their knowledge of the landscape, the Apache could stage ambushes and retreat to hidden strongholds where they could regroup and plan further actions. However, the arrival of European colonists, first the Spanish, then the Mexicans, and later the Americans, profoundly affected Apache life. While the Apache had historic rivalries with neighboring tribes, they managed to maintain a degree of independence and territorial control for much of their history. This began to shift in the 16th century when the Spanish arrived in the Southwest. The Spanish first encountered the Apache in the late 1500s as they expanded into what is now the southwestern United States. Unlike many other Native American tribes, the Apache were not as severely impacted by the early wave of European diseases, such as smallpox, which devastated numerous indigenous communities. However, the introduction of horses by the Spanish had a far more significant impact on the Apache and other tribes in the region. The Spanish brought horses to the Americas during their conquests, initially using them for transportation and military purposes. Horses soon became highly valuable to Native Americans. The Apache were among the first to adopt and master the use of horses, which drastically changed their way of life. Already skilled as hunters and warriors on foot, the Apache became even more formidable on horseback. With horses, they could expand their territory, conduct raids with enhanced efficiency, and execute attacks with greater speed and precision. With the introduction of horses, the Apache could now traverse vast distances swiftly, allowing them to hunt buffalo more efficiently and ambush enemy tribes or colonial settlements with increased force. Horses became a powerful symbol for the Apache, enabling them to maintain a degree of independence despite mounting colonial pressures on their land. In contrast, the Comanche, originally a smaller group from the Shoshone people residing in the Rocky Mountains, underwent a significant transformation with the arrival of horses. Like many other Plains tribes, the Comanche were profoundly affected by the presence of horses in the region. Horses allowed them to shift their lifestyle and become one of the most dominant and feared tribes across the Great Plains. Although the Comanche initially lived in the Rockies, their skillful adoption of horseback riding gave them a distinct advantage, allowing them to expand southward and establish themselves as a formidable force over neighboring tribes. By the 1700s, the Comanche had become expert horsemen, transforming their way of life to take full advantage of their newfound mobility. They evolved beyond a traditional hunter-gatherer society, becoming formidable mounted warriors capable of executing rapid raids on other tribes and settlements. Renowned for their speed, agility, and mastery of horseback combat, the Comanche used their skills to dominate the southern Great Plains, covering much of what is now Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. Their extensive control over the plains earned them the title Lords of the Plains. The Comanche's superior mounted tactics allowed them to defend their territory not only against rival tribes, but also against colonial forces, including the Spanish and, later, the Americans. Skilled in raiding, Comanche warriors often used hit-and-run tactics to strike enemy settlements, vanishing into the vast plains before a counterattack could be launched. The Comanche's horse culture and military tactics enabled them to control vast territories and establish an empire-like network of alliances and trading partners. They effectively maintained a monopoly over the horse trade, which granted them significant economic power. Horses became a form of currency among the Comanche, and their trade in horses allowed them to acquire firearms and other valuable goods. Additionally, the Comanche emerged as one of the dominant forces in the fur trade, exchanging animal pelts for European goods. As the Comanche expanded into the southern Great Plains, they inevitably came into conflict with the Apache, who had long inhabited the region. This expansion turned the struggle into a fight not only for territory, but also for the very survival of both tribes. The rise of the Comanche as a dominant power on the plains shifted the balance of power in the region, intensifying the conflict between these two formidable Native American groups. The Comanche's superior skill in mounted warfare provided them with a decisive advantage over the Apache, who largely relied on foot soldiers and traditional combat techniques. While the Apache were expert ambushers, they found it difficult to combat the fast-moving Comanche in the open plains. The Comanche, unmatched in open field battles, could strike swiftly across the plains. By the early 1700s, they began to push the Apache from the fertile plains into the more rugged and mountainous regions. Although the Apache fought courageously to defend their territory, they were ultimately outmatched by the Comanche's cavalry tactics. With each failed attempt to resist, the Apache were gradually forced to retreat into the mountains and deserts, seeking the natural defenses of these harsher terrains. The Comanche aimed not only to seize Apache land, but also to decimate the Apache population. They launched a series of devastating raids on Apache villages, where men, women, and children were often killed indiscriminately. Those who survived these attacks were either forced to flee or were captured and enslaved. The conflict between the Apache and Comanche became even more complex with European involvement, particularly by the Spanish. Long embroiled in conflict with the Apache, the Spanish viewed the rising power of the Comanche as both a potential threat and an opportunity. As the Spanish began to expand their settlements in the southwestern United States, they formed alliances with the Comanche, recognizing the strategic advantage of using them as allies against the Apache. In exchange for their support in protecting Spanish settlements in Texas and New Mexico, the Spanish supplied the Comanche with firearms, ammunition, and other goods, further strengthening Comanche dominance in the region. This alliance tipped the balance of power decisively in favor of the Comanche, trapping the Apache in a vice, with pressure from both the Comanche and the Spanish. Once fierce adversaries of the Apache, the Spanish now viewed the Comanche as a stronger and more dependable ally. Increasingly reliant on the Comanche for protection and trade, the Spanish provided them with resources that enabled more effective campaigns against the Apache. This Spanish-Comanche alliance played a pivotal role in the near destruction of the Apache. The Comanche's ability to combine traditional warfare tactics with firearms, along with their unmatched skills on horseback, made them an almost unstoppable force. In contrast, the Apache struggled to adapt to the new European-introduced technologies, making their traditional fighting methods less effective against the Comanche's mounted warfare. This technological and tactical disadvantage contributed significantly to the Apache's downfall, leading to widespread displacement and, in many cases, near extermination. The 18th century was a devastating period for the Apache. As the Comanche continued their aggressive campaign, the Apache were gradually pushed further into the mountainous regions of the Southwest. Year by year, more Apache families were driven from their ancestral lands, leaving the once powerful tribe fragmented and weakened. The loss of their warriors, territory, and cultural heritage marked the beginning of the end for the Apache as a unified force. By the early 1800s, the Apache had lost their former dominance. The rise of the Comanche as lords of the plains, combined with the technological advantages provided by the Spanish, and later the Americans, ensured that the Apache would not regain their past strength. Although some Apache bands managed to survive in isolated regions, they no longer held the military power they once did. The conflict between the Apache and Comanche had profound consequences, not only for the two tribes, but for the history of the American Southwest as a whole. The defeat of the Apache and the rise of the Comanche marked the end of an era. As the dominant force on the Great Plains, the Comanche would shape the region's dynamics for decades to come. For the Apache, the aftermath was marked by tragedy and loss. The near extermination of their people, the loss of their lands, and the erosion of their culture left lasting impacts. The Apache would never reclaim their former military strength, and their capacity to resist colonial forces was permanently diminished. Ultimately, the Apache-Comanche conflict serves as a powerful reminder of the destructive force of colonization, the resilience of indigenous peoples, and the complex interplay of culture, warfare, and survival against overwhelming odds. The story of these two tribes reflects not just a history of warfare, but a narrative of shifting power dynamics and the brutal consequences of the forces that reshaped the American West.